Speaker's off. Let me turn that on. Hello?
Stan?
Much better. How about picture? There we go.
Got you. There we go. How are you?
Alrighty. How you doing, man?
Really well. How are you?
Good.
First of all, really appreciate your time. Really appreciate your time. It's quite, I bet you're a bit hot topic at the minute, are you? Busy?
Yeah, I just decided to put out the vertical diet 2 days ago, and it's been crazy.
Gone through the roof. Seen it all on the social media. It's looking good, eh?
Yeah, I was only using it for my clients for the longest time, and then I finally decided to put it out available for anyone to purchase as a download on my site, and I've hardly slept in 3 days.
Response been good?
Yeah, it's been amazing, and I try and respond to everybody that has questions. That's the hardest part, is I hold myself to a high standard.
No, that's good. That's a good way to be. So definitely a bloke that needs like no introduction whatsoever. IFBB pro bodybuilder, world record powerlifter, one of only 10 men. You might correct me here. One of only 10 men to lift over 2,300 pounds raw.
You know what's funny is that since I wrote that intro, like 20 other people have gotten over 2,300. It's ridiculous.
Oh, really?
Happened.
Oh, no, keep it at 10. Keep it at 10. 10 sounds better.
Yeah, 10 sounds better.
Keep it at 10. Don't tell anyone else that. Keep it at 10.
I think I'm the only one over 40. I'll give myself that.
Oh, yeah, take that. Yeah, that's better. That's better than 10.
Yeah.
I'd take that. So, just to touch on it, Stan, just a little bit of your background as to just how you sort of got into weightlifting, your sort of path. I mean, I've watched a lot of your videos, whether it be talking about graduating college or whatever it was, 135 pounds, to then sort of working on the farms and going back to the basics with the training, with the food, and then just kind of building that up gradually to sort of put you in the process, the path that you've kind of been on ever since.
Yeah, I'm like a lot of folks. I just wanted to get bigger, stronger, faster. I was a skinny kid. And I just got bit by the bug. I got addicted to strength and to the change of the physique. And I see it now. It's gotten so popular. And now that we've opened up competition to bikini and figure and the men's physique and classic bodybuilding, there's just more arenas for people to show their talent. And the participation rate just in the last 5 years is absolutely exploded. It's just awesome to see. It's provided a lot of people a lot more opportunity, not just for themselves as competitors, but in terms of the business potential. Of course, social media has a huge part and role in that, in putting us and connecting us together. So it's not just the great information, but it's also the financial opportunity and the participation. And it's becoming more and more of a fraternity or sorority, as you might say. We're getting further and further away from attacking each other and closer and closer to learning how all of our various disciplines can benefit each other.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think how does that compare sort of now as to what it was like when you first started getting in the game? Were you one of the outliers when you first started getting in the game, or was it still quite common then?
Well, the challenge back then is I was, being 135 pounds, and bodybuilding being the only platform to compete in at the time, or powerlifting.
Yeah.
That was a long road. That was a decade of struggle to get yourself somewhere to you could actually compete at a reasonable level. And, nowadays you've got some very talented physiques where you can jump on stage, at just about any body weight.
Yeah.
And be competitive just from training hard and being physically fit. Back then, you had, if you were 6'6" like me, you had to be north of 240 pounds ripped before you could do anything at the national level.
Yeah.
And so it kind of pigeonholed you into one option, and that was just getting as massive as possible. Whereas nowadays, guys, they can take advantage of the their own physique without having to morph into something that might not be consistent with their genetic potential.
Yeah, 100%. So in terms of in terms of your training philosophy, sort of what did you find early doors? Did it take years to sort of craft where you've kind of got to now, or did you kind of? I know now you're a big part of the basics work, which is quite refreshing to hear. That's kind of always been sort of my philosophy. I think a lot of people nowadays, especially, are looking for, let's say, a quick fix, whether it be nutritional, whether it be training related. And I think the short answer is there isn't one. I think the basics work, and I think the more I worked in professional sport for 6 years, and I think the more I develop and grow as a coach and as a person, the more I simplify things. And I think some people think it's going to be the other way around. I think some people think you're going to overcomplicate things, and I think you find what works, and no matter how many different steps you make in different directions, you always come back to the basics, whether it be nutrition or whether it be training.
Yeah, you have to hammer away at the basics with extraordinary amount of discipline and consistency. You become it becomes more and more important as you progress, because you become, what I've always said, a bit of a victim of your own circumstance, a slave to the demands of your body or your performance capabilities that now require you to get a minimum of a certain amount of recovery, sleep, nutrition, and in the absence of that, performance is going to suffer. So you can, turn over every stone and look for every, possible gimmick or trick or secret that you want, but none of them will compensate for deficiency in any of the fundamentals, the sleeping and eating right, and training smart, and rehabilitating correctly. Any of those things lag. I've said it before. If you're religiously taking creatine but sleeping 5 hours, you're a fucking idiot. You'll never get anywhere with that kind of mindset. And I say this now more recently in terms of healthcare or optimizing health, that a lot of people are chasing things that I think that are reactionary and not proactive. I use as an example, like in medicine, it's sick care. You prescribe a medication to manage a symptom of something that you should be looking to prevent in the first place. And I feel the same way about pre-workouts or caffeine. If you don't have energy and need a pep, some sort of stimulant, then there's something wrong. And you should get in front of that, not behind it. Yeah. You shouldn't be reactionary. You should be proactive. And that's why I harp so much on the sleep and the sodium and a balanced nutritional program, so your micronutrient deficiencies aren't causing you to be tired. Because something like caffeine, like any drug, every action has an equal and opposite reaction, and it only mitigates that one problem, which may be poor energy at that time, but it compounds and complicates long-term the deficiencies that are causing the problem. Yeah. So I'm really cautious when I work with folks about sticking with the fundamentals, like you said.
Yeah. I think a lot of people look for or chase the 1% and actually neglect the other 99.
That's correct.
Now, if you nail the 99, you're not going to be far off wrong. Whereas if you nail the 1, you're going to be some way off. And I think a big lesson, which again is quite really refreshing, even someone like yourself with all the experience you've got still comes back to that. I think some people think some people not as experienced think I'm a little bit narrow-minded as a coach and go, well, you should be able to recommend this or recommend this. And to be honest, I think it's them people that are in that for the wrong reasons. I think it's the same with training. I've seen 15, 16-year-old athletes on the same program for 6 months, 12 months, progressively getting better and better and better, whereas someone comes to you after 3 weeks and tells you they're bored. Actually they're in the process for the wrong reasons. It's a discipline, like you said, to follow the fundamentals, the 99%, not necessarily worrying about the 1%, but majority of people worry about the 1 and forget and neglect the 99.
Yeah, and I put it like this: if something in the 1% works, it's because you have a pre-existing deficiency. If creatine works, you're probably dehydrated and not eating enough red meat. If a protein powder works, you're probably not getting adequate protein from your diet. Yeah. Vitamin D supplementation only works if you have a deficiency. and right down the line in terms of hormone optimization, testosterone, thyroid, you name it. Those supplements are as effective if your system is optimal from your nutrition program and sleeping and recovery.
Yeah, 100%, which brings me kind of on to the next point, which is your hot topic at the minute, the vertical diet.
Yeah.
How do you come to sort of, and it's not even like you say, it's not a formula as such, it's just doing the basics. How did you come back to that, and how did you find so much success with athletes, one with yourself, and then, you know, next with athletes that you work with? How did you first come about that?
Well, you know, you learn by trial and error, and I've made tons of mistakes over, you know, greater than 30 years of training, and I've had the opportunity to work with some of the greatest coaches and athletes in the world, and I've picked up little tidbits along the way. I didn't create any of this stuff. I was able to find the information, and I was absolutely, you know, dogged about searching for everything I could. I used to sit up in the science library in college until they kicked me out at midnight scrolling through microfiche, and it's never changed. You know, I read every Muscle and Fitness that came out every month with a highlighter and a notepad and bent pages, and I still do that with all the books that I read, all the seminars that I attend, and all the, you know, the great professional PhD knowledgeable resources that are out there now. You know, the Schoenfelds of the world, and the Greg Nuckols and Dr. Stuart McGills, and the Chris Duffins, and you know, just all these incredibly brilliant people who have devoted their time and energy to this sport. And I've just tried to glean from them every little nugget of information I can, and then I applied it to myself, and then I measured the results with blood tests, with you know, performance objectives, and was able to kind of hobble together this you know, vertical diet and optimizing performance. A part of it also is because I've struggled my whole career from being a little guy, 135 pounds in college, with gaining muscle and size and strength. And I've always also struggled with hormone deficiencies, and I've struggled with digestion problems. And so I've had to be really cautious about what I ate. Yeah. And I realized that it's not what you consume, it's what your body utilizes. Yeah. And that certain diets can cause just as much harm as benefit. With when you start to increase muscle, you may also be increasing fat and causing digestion problems and creating hormone deficiencies at the same time, which I come across time and time again with some of these great athletes, is that they're kind of stuck in a position to where their body's not responding anymore. And so the vertical diet for me is first and foremost about optimizing how efficiently your body utilizes the calories by making sure the calories are nutrient dense and aren't associated with a lot of the baggage that comes along with, you know, phytic acid and lectins and oxalates and you know, enzyme inhibitors and just anything that makes you gassy or bloated or you know, just distracts from, you know, a good quality digestive health, so you can digest your food better, utilize more of the nutrients in particular, absorb more of those. So I focus on gut health. I focus on the types of foods that I eat, allergies, and those kinds of things with athletes. I look at their blood panels to make sure that they're, you know, don't have any deficiencies such as the vitamin D or insulin resistance or, you know, high prolactin, you know, high thyroid stimulating hormone, anything that would affect performance. And I try and intervene and correct those things. And I go right down to the nitty gritty with these athletes. I'm like their mom. I go in and find out what time they went to bed, how many times they're waking up, what's the quality of their sleep. Do they have a child or a pet sleeping in the bed, preventing them from getting into REM sleep for any significant amount of time? How dark is the room? How quiet is the room? You know, so I focus on these things. You know, when they travel, I'm looking at the logistics of what time they had to get up, when they land, whether or not they're staying at a place with a kitchenette. Do they take their meals? Do they have meals waiting for them? Everything you can imagine, right down to taking Larry Wheels to the store to buy rice cooker with a delay timer, so he can have his food sitting there ready for him. Those things to me are of paramount importance. Having what you need when you need it in a very efficient and effective manner, so you're not foraging for food at 2 a.m. in the morning in some foreign city, getting room service pizza and waking up with diarrhea. Those are the things to me that matter. So I focus on those. I don't know if I got away from the question, but that's
No, it kind of leads me on to my next one, which would be, obviously you've worked with, some man mountains such as, Thor, Brian Shaw, Larry Wheels, these sort of guys. How would you differentiate them sort of guys to a bikini athlete, let's say? Are you using the same sort of food groups, or exactly the same food groups, just different quantities, calories, whatever, or is it slightly different?
No, you hit it on the head. It's the same foods. It's the same focus. It's focusing on digestive health first and hormone health, not suppressing those hormones with the wrong foods, the wrong training protocol, poor sleep habits. So I focus on gut health first, and then micronutrients after that, making sure that they're eating foods that are highly bioavailable and dense in micronutrients that are easily utilizable. They're not bound up with anti-nutrients. And then, anybody can copy and paste a diet, but a good coach has to have the knowledge to ask the right questions and to be able to solve the answers. If somebody says to me a particular food doesn't work, or if they're having an ongoing problem with a hormone imbalance or some deficiency, then I've got to be able to intervene and find them solutions to those problems. And so the diet is similar. The whole framework of recovery, stimulating the right hormones so your body's doing more of the work for you. I'm able to take someone with an extraordinary track record. You wouldn't think you could do much for a Thor or a Brian Shaw, 4-time world's strongest man. I didn't create that guy. I'm not a guru, but I went in and we collaborate. He's to their credit, they're willing to have somebody look over all of their training and nutrition protocols and see if there are opportunities. Just like myself, when I sought out Eddie Cohn and Flex Wheeler and Mark Bell and Charles Glass and Dave Palumbo, I went to all these people. I paid for their services. I learned everything I could to try and better myself. And so, I was able, from my experience and the knowledge I gleaned from all of these great athletes, to find some things that Thor and Shaw and Larry Wheels and Dan Green and the rest of them, who are already, hugely accomplished athletes, could optimize. And it isn't one big thing like we started. It was a host of seemingly little things, like a cat in the bed, just something, or just their logistics of their travel schedule, or just maybe some irregularity from stomach irritation from particular foods. Just little teeny things. I don't get down into the percentage of 1 rep max workout programs very deeply. I think that's way down on the list of important things to optimize. So we were able to find, 5, 6, 8, 10 little things that they could change, and the whole being greater than the sum of its parts, that added up to a significant improvement in health and performance.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know going back to the vertical diet, or even watching some of the videos that you post, I'm a big fan of, obviously, the red meats and cholesterol in general, whereas cholesterol is almost like, to some people, the devil. A lot of people think there's a bad rap associated with cholesterol, the impact it has on your diet, when actually you've turned that around and said it's actually the opposite.
Yeah, and what's funny is that there's a lot of science now that proves that fact. I mean, Time Magazine came out 20 years ago with the butter is bad and eggs and bacon are bad. And then more recently, they've got a cover on their magazine saying butter is back, even Dr. Oz yesterday was like, potatoes are back, It's just been horrible the way that certain foods have been maligned and demonized, particularly ones that provide such great performance benefits like red meat. And, the science is here now, a lot of it, and it's easy to point to. Dr. Yusuf's Pure study on 200,000 participants in 14 countries, or in 200 countries over a 14-year period, from the World Health Federation, a cardiologist, very highly respected study, determined that cholesterol and saturated fats in particular were protective of cardiovascular disease and all-cause mortality. I didn't say neutral. I said protective.
Yeah.
Now, vegetables, on the other hand, were neutral. So the studies are starting to show that there's some benefit when you utilize these foods that have so much nutrient density. They found fruits to be protective. They found salt in an optimal range to be good for you, in opposition to the World Health Organization and the American Heart Association, which aren't a reputable group anyhow. The American Heart Association is not a government organization. They get $1 billion a year in quote-unquote donations that are tax-free to put their heart health stamp on breakfast cereals, of all things. And they were, largely started by Procter & Gamble, who gave us Crisco, oil. So these aren't the people we should be listening to. They ask for 70% carbohydrates in their food pyramid. The Pure study showed that anything over 55% was harmful to your health, as we're starting to discover more and more now. And I say all of that, and then I go back and say this. I've just kind of found out over the years, the bro science, what works.
Yeah.
And when you go to Venice Gym in the 1980s and go there, all through the 90s, and you see over and over and over again, the very best athletes are eating 7 or 8 times a day, sleeping 9 or 10 hours at night with naps, training twice a day, and just live, breathe, eat, and think the sport. And they all eat. Every one of them was eating massive amounts of red meat. Hell, they named a food at Firehouse after Bob Ciccarello, called the Bob Bowl, and it's 2 servings of steak with white rice. I mean, how hard is that? I didn't invent any of this. This is 30 years old by my recollection, and probably much older than that by many other successful athletes long before them. So I just know it works, and now the science supports it. My success has been largely as a result of it, because I've tried everything else. I've tried the chicken, I've tried the fish, I've tried the restriction, I've tried the broccoli, and I've tried all of that. And I've constantly found that every time I eat red meat, my performance improves. Every time I put my athletes on red meat, their performance improves. And that doesn't just mean strength and size. That means bikini athletes who now have more energy, more stamina, more endurance. Their body composition improves for the better. Their hormones change and improve for the better using the things in the vertical diet. And that's not just red meat. That's fruit, which they tend to avoid. That's a whole variety of micronutrients, from spinach, a daily carrot, chicken stock for gut health, just so many things. Iodine to stimulate the thyroid gland, the fructose, which drastically stimulates the liver and increases body temperature, of all things, thermogenesis.
Yeah.
And fats and proteins and too much cardio and less sleep suppresses all of that. So you completely flip the script on what has traditionally been, customary or accepted with the old copy and paste programs, and people start to feel amazing, and they're not declining in health. They don't rebound from this deficiency state with edema and fat gain and exhaustion, and their whole system shuts down. So it works across the board. It is very effective, and it's not gimmicky. It's not based on supplements or some sort of superfood. It's not based on restriction. It's not based on any gimmicks. So that's why it's so effective, and I'm so confident that it can work for so many people.
Yeah, 100%. One of the things you did touch on previously was sleep. And again, I know from watching quite a lot of your seminars, you would rather an athlete miss the workout if he was tired to get extra sleep.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sleep loss limits fat loss is a great article that I read from a PhD. I think it's Schesler is his name, and he handles. He consults, NFL and NHL and all kinds of professional teams about sleep, particularly ones that travel and have trouble with jet lag, etc.
Yeah.
And it's the single most important thing, not just in terms of energy and performance, but also for blood pressure, for type 2 diabetes, in terms of insulin resistance. All of the things that all of these declining metabolic conditions start with sleep. And then that goes even beyond that to brain health and Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
Dr. Bredesen, the author of the End of Alzheimer's, one of the first things he talks about, the more you sleep, the healthier your brain is, the longer it's healthy. Your brain's after your liver, it's the second largest detoxifying organ in the body. And so, while I'm trying to minimize toxins, I'm also trying to maximize the body and the brain's opportunity to recover from sleep. And that only happens in REM and stage 4.
Yeah.
Hence, getting the cat out of the bed, because every time it stands up or turns over, and the kids, and I've got a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old, I'm very sensitive to that. But every time they squawk or move and you end up with a foot in the face, you might be in bed for 8 hours, but you didn't sleep for 8 hours. And very little of that was in the optimal zone. And so that's one of the first things I talk about. It's in the vertical diet. I don't send somebody a diet plan. I send them the whole program because none of these things happen to the exclusion of any other. They have to be done together. The sleeping, the nutrition, and the training all has to come together as a package. The 10-minute walks, all of these things, they're all done together. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
And again, I'm sure you've probably had the same sort of thing. Me as a coach as well, working with whether it be athletes or members of the public, when, let's say, fat loss is a goal, a lot of them think, well, actually, I'll cut back on a little bit of sleep and I'll do more. When actually that then has the opposite effects, because then you get hormone imbalance again, increased cortisol, which blunts the fat loss process, and then it turns into a little bit of a vicious cycle. One of the hardest things to convince, again, is the basics of, well, actually, you're better off pulling that out and putting some more sleep in. And they think that, again, they think it's just you going, well, you can sleep more, but it actually, like you say, is another foundation, another base, and another part of that 99% that you want to get right.
And the most important part, and something that is huge there, when people go on a diet, they immediately cut calories, restrict foods, which then creates micronutrient deficiencies. They try and exercise a whole ton when that is not the optimal way to lose weight. It's only, exercise activity thermogenesis, as you know, is probably only 5% of the calories you consume. 70% of it's your BMI, and that's going to be based on body temperature primarily, and sleep. And so, we try and optimize thyroid and testosterone function, which is best done through sleep. And the big piece is sustainability. When you give somebody a restrictive program that's overly, that requires too much workload, whether it be 40 minutes on the treadmill a day, which is just, the likelihood of that happening for any extended period of time is nil. Or you beat the hell out of them when they come to the gym, thinking that's the primary leader of results, when in fact it's not even secondary or third on the list. If you can create something that's sustainable, enjoyable, finding out what they want to eat, when they want to eat, work on the kinds of foods that stimulate metabolism instead of suppress it, focus on calories first and foremost, which you can do with portion control, or giving them foods that satiate them or stimulate metabolism. Compliance is the biggest problem. Everybody loses weight on just about any diet over the short run. But after a year, they all seem to, over 70+% of them seem to fail.
I think that's one of the big parts, and again, one that I face, and numerous other trainers will face day in, day out, is, exactly that. What is the best diet? What is the best training program? And to me, again, there isn't one. The best one is the one you're going to stick to. The best one, can you see yourself doing this in 3 to 6 months' time? If you can't, then it's not the best one for you, and it's not going to work long term.
No. Yeah, I don't prescribe anything too specific. I like to try and find out what they enjoy doing, because what's the best exercise? The one you'll do. What's the best diet? The one you'll follow. So I'm always looking for a lifestyle change, getting them involved in something that moves them a little more. That's why the 10-minute walks are so incredible, because you don't have to etch out an hour of your day to drive to the gym, do 40 minutes of cardio, and drive home. It's so easy to do. You can walk around the hotel. You can walk around the airport. You can get up and put your kids' breakfast in front of them in the morning, go take a 10-minute walk, and they're not even done when you get back. So I mean, there's just so much opportunity. It's so simple to comply with and so incredibly effective, particularly if it's post-meal. It's decreasing gas, improving digestion, increasing insulin sensitivity. It's and I use it, as you know from my rant, with, you've seen Thor and Brian Shaw taking 10-minute walks.
Yeah.
These are 440-pound guys who are trying to optimize strength. And, you know, historically or traditionally in powerlifting, the motto is don't run if you can walk, don't stand if you can sit, and don't stay awake if you can sleep. And then just shovel as many calories in as you possibly can during the day. So, you know, I've done that, and I've found out that there's better ways to optimize recovery and strength and the foods that you eat, not what you eat, what you utilize, what you absorb. And by implementing that with these guys, they saw a significant change. Brian Shaw did a DEXA scan last year at the Arnold, and he did a DEXA scan this year at the Arnold. He'd lost 14 pounds of fat between last year and this year. And I only worked with him for less than 3 months. Yeah. So that's a pretty significant difference in just his diet. And he was able to eat the foods better, sleep better. He felt healthier as well. And, you know, folks may be concerned that he didn't win. Thor had an extraordinary performance. Yeah. And B, on a technique issue, Brian wasn't able to shoulder those stones, which he shouldered repeatedly in practice. And he changed his technique right before the show. It would have been like a hair's difference. These guys were neck and neck, but for a technique issue. But his strength was great. His health was great. He tore a hamstring at the World's Strongest Man. But then after working with me and implementing some of the recovery methods and the new nutrition, he tried to pull even heavier at the Arnold. And although he missed it, he didn't hurt himself. Yeah. And he got that up to his knees. He had enough strain to, you know, it would have happened. So
I think a big sort of point you did touch on there was the amount of food you can utilize. Now I think that's a big point. I think a lot of people, especially young athletes, think in order to gain, I need to be in a mass surplus. Yeah, actually, how much of that are you going to utilize? How much can you actually digest? Are you going to spend all your time in the toilet? Whereas whatever you can utilize efficiently and effectively is going to give you that, you know, the performance increase.
Well, you hit on a couple things I want to talk about. One is how much time you sit on the toilet. A lot of the foods that you eat that you don't utilize just become waste, and it's not a nice feeling. You're in there with your spackle gun, you know, 5 times a day, and it's not. And I've been there. I've drank my gallon of milk and eaten loads and loads of spaghetti and pasta to gain weight, and I gained a lot of weight, but it didn't look too good, and it didn't help my performance. And so, you know, I bounced around between 300 pounds and 240 pounds more times back and forth than I can count, having competed in both sports. And so I have a little bit of experience with that myself. And then in learning what I learned about, you know, these diets and applying them to athletes, one of the first things, like I said, I focus on gut health, is that they become regular. And not just the regularity, but the quality of the stool. These are questions I ask. It might seem strange, but how many of your coaches ask you, you know, how are your shits? To be candid, I want to know how often and what quality. And secondary to that, and actually probably one of the things that I focus on that helps with that, other than eating the kinds of foods that have less anti-nutrients, and chicken stock obviously is huge for me. And the reason for chicken stock may be not what some of the articles say. You know, sometimes I'll talk about a food and it'll be in, people read research that it's some sort of wonder food and it does these 40 things. I'm not that kind of guy that gets on that bandwagon. Whether or not chicken stock or bone broth improves gut health is less important to me than the fact that it does increase the amount of acid in your stomach because it stimulates pepsin, and the acidity of that, the pH of your stomach. And that's one thing I focus on huge with athletes because, you know, so many of them suffer from GERD, acid reflux disease, and a lot of them are taking antacids or they're on medication, Prilosec, for years. And that drastically causes lower stomach acid and lower pH of that acid. So it inhibits digestion and limits the amount of micronutrients that you can absorb. So I'm trying to bring acid up. I'm trying to increase it. And I'm trying to lower the pH as far as possible so that the food's digested more efficiently. And so I'm trying to get people off those antacids right away.
Yeah.
And I stay away from the kinds of foods. Usually GERD or acid reflux is caused by carbohydrates that aren't properly digested.
Yeah.
And that creates gas, which then pushes that up into the esophagus and causes the burning. It's not too much acid. In most cases, it's too little acid that's causing the problem, allowing foods to get in there that aren't properly digested, creating gas, splashing around the acid. So people talk about steak. You know, I'm having a hard time digesting steak, they tell me. Well, in my mind, they have a deficiency in stomach acids, in HCl. And now I know I need to correct that, because if they can't digest steak, then they have digestive issues that are broader than steak. They're not digesting any of their foods very efficiently and not getting micronutrients out of them. So, you know, I can improve that either by having them supplement HCl and pepsin, or I can titrate, as I said, training your metabolism. I can start with 4 ounces of steak and do that for a week or 10 days, and then I go to 6 ounces of steak. Do that for a week or 10 days, and I'll add another meal. And that's the way I transition. You see it all the time with people who are vegan or vegetarian. They go off the rails and they end up somewhere at a steakhouse getting a 16-ounce porterhouse. Yeah. And talking about how for 3 days they were sick. Well, of course you were.
Yeah.
Because when you eat a lot of vegetables, you have very low stomach acid. And you throw a steak into that environment and it's not going to get digested. So I improve the environment first. And again, on the front end, I'm proactive.
Yeah.
And now I can put more of those kinds of foods in your body and you'll utilize them better. So that's a long roundabout explanation, but just some of the things I really focus on in my program.
And it shows that sort of the pinpoint sort of detail that you're going into. Whilst it's a very, very basic setup, you know, there's very, very basic food groups, there's nothing over complex there. You're not supplements this, and this, but it is going into with a fine tooth comb going, well, is this right? And is this right? And if it's not, then I'm going to address it via this, as opposed to a lot of people go, well, actually, we're going to supplement with this, or we're going to supplement with that. You know, which is exactly the opposite.
I'm not a fan.
No.
I have. There's 2 supplements I lean on. One's vitamin D, but it's not a supplement. It's not even a vitamin. It's a hormone.
Yeah.
And it's hard to get enough from food. And since we live inside and we've moved north, and the weather is like it is, we're going to have a hard time overcoming that deficiency. Again, not a vitamin, a hormone. The other one that I really like is cod liver oil.
Yeah.
Because of the omega-3s that are in it, and I think that's a food. I don't think that's a supplement.
Yeah.
Just putting that oil into a capsule so you could swallow it. You could drink cod liver oil.
It tastes like shit.
You could eat cod liver, but and the third one is, and I try and get it from a food source, is iodine.
Yeah.
You know what a big fan I am of sodium, and through Dr. D. Nicol Antonio's work from the Salt Fix, it's become so compelling how important it is to get enough sodium in. Well, in addition to that is iodine. And another note on sodium is that salt is sodium chloride. Chloride, hydrochloric acid.
Yeah.
All those things are
acid. Yeah.
It's important for digestion. So another supplement that I look at is iodine, and if I can find that from a food source, which is why I put in the cranberry juice, the pure cranberry juice, 2 4-ounce servings of that a day is 600% of your RDA. Yeah. And I reached out to the folks at the Lakewood Cranberry, the organic one I get at Whole Foods, to ask that very question. They sent me an assay that showed me exactly how much iodine was in it.
Yeah.
I reached out to the folks from Ocean Spray, who sell a pure cranberry, and they had no clue how much iodine was in theirs. And so, it's half the price, but I can't be certain.
Of course, yeah.
To any degree. So iodine's a big one for me. I like to get it from a food source. It dramatically stimulates the kidney or the thyroid. And I didn't just read that in a book or watch it in a video. I suffered that problem and had to remedy it, and that was the solution I was able to find. I take the blood tests every month for the last 12 years, as I've often said, to monitor and track how my macros and micros and any supplementation that I'm using, whether it was performance-enhancing drugs or medication or anything. I wanted to see how it affected my body and how to optimize it. So I got blood tests every single month. That's how I discovered the vitamin D deficiency. That's how I discovered that growth hormone causes some insulin resistance in me, and I had to back off of that. And that's how I discovered that my thyroid-stimulating hormone was starting to drastically elevate because my thyroid wasn't releasing enough T4 and T3.
Yeah.
TSH, for those that aren't aware, your pituitary releases it to tell your thyroid gland to release thyroid. And if your pituitary is yelling at your thyroid and it's got a hearing aid on or a problem, like my 87-year-old dad, and I have to yell at him real loud, then your TSH starts to elevate. It's yelling louder and louder and louder, but your thyroid can't hear you.
Yeah.
And so if you fix the thyroid problem because of iodine deficiency, then your TSH starts to come down. And I noticed that my TSH was elevated, almost twice normal. You take a blood test. A week later, you get the results. I see it's twice normal. I immediately start the cranberry juice for iodine.
Yeah.
And within 3 weeks, I took another blood test. My TSH was normal, and my T4 and T3 were both up into a satisfactory range. So if it's that immediate, and my energy levels were better, my sleep was better, my cholesterol went down, which is never too horrible anyhow. Triglycerides have been good throughout this whole experiment of mine. Sometimes my total cholesterol seems a little elevated because it'll get up to 250, 270, but because the statin companies have pushed the range down to 200 and below so they could prescribe their poison, I'm made to think that 270 is unhealthy, but all the research suggests just the opposite. The people below 200 have a higher incidence of all-cause mortality than people over 200. So I don't mean to keep bouncing around, but I hate to leave folks hanging on some of these things that I think are really, really important, so I'll talk very briefly about them as we go along.
Yeah. So essentially from an iodine deficiency, you essentially found that all these improvements, which majority of people wouldn't even think about, whether it's supplementation, whether it's through food, wouldn't even think that they would always jump to something else. They would jump to an extra workout, or they would jump to, whatever else, another hour in the gym or whatever, over something, let's say, as simple as whether it's supplementation or through food. And again, talking about your stimulating the thyroid and, where you got the fructose. So there's the orange, whether it be orange juice or whether it be the whole orange. I know you're big on them as well.
Well, and the fructose is amazing, and that's been demonized, of course, because of soda pops with high fructose corn syrup and the quantity that people drink.
Yeah.
If you get, your liver can only hold about 75 to 100 grams of fructose converted and stored a day, and you go over that, and the liver will keep sucking it in and converting it to fat. It loves that stuff. Yeah. And that will beget fatty liver disease and then all the metabolic problems that occur downstream from that. But if you only throw in about 50 grams a day, periodically throughout the day, like I use with 3 ounces of orange juice 3 times a day or a half an orange 3 times a day, I use it like medicine.
Yeah.
Almost like my cranberry juice, 4 ounces twice a day. I use food like medicine to allow my body to have what it needs to do its job better, and not try and trick it on the back end with any stupid thing like caffeine again. So the fructose, a lot of people don't know that it powerfully stimulates the liver. 70% of thyroid conversion from T4 to T3 occurs in the liver. So you're increasing your metabolism. It increases your body temperature. If you're trying to lose fat, now we're back to how are calories burned. We talked about 5% is done from exercise activity thermogenesis.
Yeah.
And we know another 5 or 10% is done from the thermic activity of food, protein being higher than carbs and fats. But we know that every bit of 60 to 70% is based on your basal metabolic rate. Yeah. And so if I can increase your body temperature without clenbuterol, right? Then because it's sustainable with fructose and in an appropriate dose, then you can do that year round. And you wake up in the morning and your body temperature is elevated. You're burning fat around the clock, and that's what we shoot for when we take T3 or when we take Clen or when we take caffeine. And again, those are all very short-term things that cause homeostatic problems along the way. Of course, you have the feedback loop, and you're releasing cortisol and adrenaline to combat all of those stimulants. So I get on the front end of that, and people start losing fat and have an increase in energy as a result of something as simple as eating a few oranges a day, which are also an anti-estrogen. They're a naringenin. Oranges and carrots work that way.
So, and I know that's a big thing behind the fructose as well is the ability that you have to uptake essentially more carbohydrate with a combination of glucose and fructose post-workout.
Absolutely,
as
yeah.
opposed to just glucose alone, using both together obviously increase the capacity obviously both use two different protein transports through the intestine, and which is essentially means we can uptake more carbohydrate quicker post-workout with them both as opposed to just glucose alone.
You're 100% right, and there's a PhD that did a great study on that. He also cautions not to take proteins or fats with that drink.
Yeah.
So I would remind people that the immediate post-workout drink, particularly for high-active individuals, MMA fighters, CrossFit, bodybuilders with a lot of volume, athletes, football, etc., immediately following training, if you can get that dextrose-fructose blend and sodium, you get a good 1,000 milligrams of salt, and some water, you're replacing what you just burned. And now if you have a second workout that day, as many MMA fighters, CrossFit, football players do, that second workout becomes almost euphoric. You can't even imagine how you ever trained previously in the absence of that recovery. It's pretty phenomenal. And you're only replacing what you burned. I got this from George Lockhart, who trained Conor McGregor and John Jones and so many other great UFC fighters. And it was just phenomenal when I started using it with the MMA fighters that I train. They came back to me. I mean, their eyes were just wide open. They're like, man, I killed it last night. They were just a whole new person just because they replaced what they burned. Glycogen, sodium, and water. That was it.
I heard actually in some of there was caffeine added as well, wasn't there? Which obviously
George likes to throw 100
increase
milligrams. George likes to throw 100 milligrams of caffeine in there, and I think that's great if it's an early workout, not a late workout. And that's just to speed up the whole absorption process, how much and how fast you can get into your. Then 30 minutes or an hour later, I'm back on normal meals.
So, which is a big sort of take home for me as well as I've been for the last couple of months. That being the one and only, let's call it supplement. Let's not talk about vitamin D being supplement, whatever. But that being the only supplement or drink, taken. And then everything else is just basic whole food, just done. And I think one of the big things is, which a lot of people miss, is the consistency. There is no quick fix, and it is that consistency of day in, day out, meal by meal, which I guess you'll have seen with all the top athletes you've worked with as well. So there isn't any miracle potion or any miracle meal. A lot of it is consistency and day in, day out, ticking the boxes.
You know what the miracle is? The miracle is how good that works and how easy it is. That's the miracle. Because just about everything anybody ever suggests is either really expensive or compromising to your health or hardly sustainable. Those fundamentals, when properly adhered to and consistently adhered to, you just feel amazing all the time, and every single workout just gets better and better and better, and you've got energy and you're not as sore as long. I can't harp enough at how important that stuff is.
So just before we kind of wrap up, if you had one take-home message which you could give to whether it be a young aspiring athlete or someone just looking to sort of change what they do, is there one thing that if you'd have known right at the start of your career which you could have changed, what would that be?
It's everything we just talked about, and it's easily applied. I've got on my website now, as we discussed in the opening, the vertical diet and peak performance. It's everything we just talked about and more. The exact program I give to IFBB bikini girls and the exact program I give to the 4-time world's strongest man. It's the same fundamentals we talked about, and I map it out, starting with sleep and how to optimize that. I'm going to nutrition, and I include every single food item that we discussed today and then some, as well as sample meal plans. And then the training, and I put in both hypertrophy and strength training blocks so that people can, throughout the course of the year, train them, in waves. And I spell it out in such an easy, step-by-step form, checklists that I still use today. I haven't competed in 5 years. I still have a little piece of mechanical paper or math paper, and I've got the days of the month, and I've got a list of all the things I do every day. I check off whether or not I ate my carrot that day. I check off whether or not I had an orange. I use little tick marks to how many walks I took. I register my weight, of course, and I actually go through this checklist every night before bed and make sure that I've done everything I'm supposed to do. I took my vitamin D, and not vitamin D ball, but vitamin D3. And, it's amazing how effective those little tiny things are. If I had some, miracle workout or fancy, miracle supplements, I'd share it.
Yeah.
I'd sell it is what I would do. I'd put my name on it and sell it. But it doesn't exist.
No.
I've tried them all. And if anything, it's a hindrance because you don't never get in front of the problem. You're always reactionary.
Yeah, 100%. So all that is all that I've seen anyway, but obviously just to anyone that is unaware, all that's available on your website anyway. That's right.
Yeah, everything's Stan Efferding. StanEfferding.com is my website, and you can just select the vertical diet. I've got mapped out the exact same program that I emailed Thor and Brian Shaw and Larry Wheels and Dan Green and IFBB Pro Bikini Girls and Stephanie Souza, Steph Fitmom from Australia, had got a program recently. So it's for men and women, moms and dads, athletes at all levels. And it's the exact same program that I copy and paste and put into their emails when I send it to them. I finally, after so many people asked me about it, I decided, here it is.
There you go. Yeah. And as I'm seeing from social media, there's plenty of people jumping on the bandwagon, no matter what walk of life they're from, what sort of discipline they're in. It can, it's a blueprint which essentially you've found from over the years of, let's call it, trial and error, and then living and learning as to what you've found that this actually works. And it doesn't just work with you, it works with pretty much anyone that kind of turns a hand to it. Yep.
I feel like it does, and some people have to make some minor adjustments made up based on their own personal taste and how their body reacts to some of the foods. But generally speaking, this all the stuff we just talked about, it seems so easy. I almost feel, bad when I charge for it.
Hey, but if it works, it works. People want results. People want to see results. So
I just don't think it's particularly brilliant by any stretch of the imagination on my part. And I don't have a PhD, and I'm constantly, just amazed by the level of the talent and the smarts that are out there now with some of these people. I mean, Dr. Bo Hightower is a Mensa member with 157 IQ and 2 doctoral degrees, and I'm not that guy,
But you're that guy from the University of Life. You've learned through, essentially, experience, and I think in many things, whether it's any sort of walk of life, whether it's coaching or whatever, you learn by doing. And I think, you can also get the opposite end of the spectrum, where you get people who are the bookworm and who have done all the degrees, and yet they've actually no applied practice. So, they're always going to fall down. So, there's no substitute in my eyes for experience. Find what works for you. If it doesn't work, find another way and essentially fine-tune it like you have done to find what works for you, and then you apply it.
Yeah, 100%. And, one of the hardest things to overcome, like we talked about, is all of these myths or preconceptions or demonizations of certain foods or food groups, and it hampers people's ability to confidently, use the kinds of foods that I recommend. And for instance, steak is a perfect example. Dairy products is another one, and the Peer study showed that if anything, they were protective, and there was no science to suggest that going from a whole fat to a non-fat dairy was healthy for kids or adults.
Yeah.
There certainly wasn't any adverse health effects from the consumption of dairy, which we've known from the Western A. Price Foundation's research done in the 20s and 30s by Dr. Price. That was a basic to diets of healthy people all over the world. And so people demonize these things, and whether you have a lactose intolerance or not, and you still need calcium, and you got to try and find it from the most optimal source. And so I might move to a Greek yogurt or a cheese. People have demonized eggs, and egg yolks are loaded with nutrition, choline, vitamin K2, biotin, chromium. It's just amazing what all of those things do. So I don't know if we're starting off on another podcast here or we're wrapping up, but
whichever one you want to do.
I just can't get away from how important all this is, and how people need to let go of some of their idiosyncrasies possibly, or what they think they know about nutrition, and give these things a try. It's certainly been beneficial for myself and the athletes I've trained. And just testimonials from average folks. It's not even for athletes. I had a woman this morning did a testimonial. She lost 75 pounds.
Yeah, that's it. I watched it about 10 minutes before this, actually.
Yeah, and she's got great energy levels. She never suffered throughout the process. She didn't overtrain. She didn't undereat. She didn't have cravings. It's been glorious for her. So
it shows two complete opposite ends of the scale. You've got that woman there, and then you've got your Larry Wheels, your Brian Shaws, your Hafthors at this end, and it's the same principle which has worked for both.
It's the same principle. It's based on health, and I'm a retired meat-neck bodybuilder and powerlifter, but the reason I was able to get there is because I focused on these core principles of making sure that I had all the micronutrients I needed. So for me, it's not macros, it's micros and gut health.
Yeah.
And a diverse, easily digestible, broad choices of foods. And then you build calories for larger athletes with the steak and rice. And they perform incredibly. So there you have it.
Top man, Stan, absolute pleasure. I'm very, very grateful again for your time. We've actually been pretty much an hour there.
Oh, wow.
So
great.
Really, really appreciate your time. Also, do need some recommendations at some point. I'm actually in Vegas in like 5 weeks. I need some gym recommendations.
Oh, yeah. Come just hit me up. I've got a gym in my garage or right down the street. Hit me up and you can come train with us.
Mega. Top man. Appreciate your time. Really appreciate your time. Thank you very much for that.
Awesome.
Top
Thanks
man.
again.
Speak soon. Thanks, Stan.
Bye now.